Here I have the iPhone 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, and 15 Pro Max. I've used them, tested them, and now we're gonna compare them. And by the end of this video, we'll answer the question, how pro is the 15 Pro Max and whether older Pro iPhones are any different. What is a Pro iPhone? I believe that the Pro iPhone must have the best cameras to replace the full-size cameras. Pro iPhones also must be resistant to wear and tear, use high-quality materials, and feel like a tool. Pro iPhone must have an easy way to deal with all the videos you shoot and transfer them to a computer easily. Pro iPhone must have a long battery life and charge fast. I can continue this for a few more minutes, but the point is, the Pro iPhone should be the best in every way, and this is exactly how I'm gonna assess these iPhones. I'll start with the cameras, because this is probably the most interesting area of these three phones. iPhone 13 Pro Max has a 12 megapixel main sensor, and 14 and 15 Pro Max have 48 megapixel sensors. On one hand, this bigger sensor yields better results with more details, but on the other hand, the edges of the photos tend to get blurry when you shoot close-ups on the main lens. Like, here's a photo of a page taken on all three from the same distance. On 13 Pro, the edges are crisp and in focus. On 14 and 15 Pro, blurry and weird looking. I was hoping that they'd fix that with 15 Pro, but no, the problem is still there. Aside from that, the daylight photos on all three phones look similar. The 15 Pro has a bit more detail thanks to the default 24 megapixel resolution, but 14 and 13 Pro are not that far off. Also, the 14 and 15 Pro can shoot in 48 megapixel HEIF, and the quality in that case is identical. The 15 Pro Max also should give better HDR performance, but it's not always the case. Smart HDR5 should even out the exposure of different areas of the photo a bit better, but sometimes the photos on 15 Pro look even worse than in the 14 and 13 Pro. 15 Pro Max makes the photos a bit too processed sometimes, which hopefully will get fixed with software updates in the future. Also, I can't stand but notice the improvements to the low light photos the 15 Pro gives. Here, it's as simple as it gets. More details in the shot, better color accuracy, and so on. It doesn't always perform reliably, and in some cases, the 14 Pro can give a bit more details in certain areas of the photo. 13 Pro Max is slightly behind the 14 Pro in this too, but I can't say the difference is that big. And one more thing, the time it takes to take low light shots is different on all three. Where the 13 needs 2 seconds, the 14 needs 1, and 15 can just shoot without night mode at all. This is surely the new photonic engine kicking in, squeezing even more from the last year's sensor. You know, all of these things I said are mainly about the default photos with default settings, because there is also a Pro RAW mode. It shoots 12 megapixel shots for the 13 Pro Max and 48 megapixel photos for the 14 and 15 Pro Max. And here the difference is as huge as you may think. The photos on 14 and 15 Pro Max are so much better than the 13 Pros. The 14 and 15 yield identical 48 megapixel RAW photos, no difference whatsoever. The processing of those RAW photos on 15 Pro Max takes slightly less time thanks to the improved performance. As far as the ultra-wide camera goes, here the results are also obvious. The ultra-wide photos from the 13 Pro have slightly less detail and less dynamic range. 14 and 15 Pro Max, on the other hand, are a bit more detailed and treat colors better. The 15 here also takes a lead over the 14, but the difference is really negligible. They're just too similar. And these similarities continue when we look at the zoom cameras. This is a really interesting part. iPhone 13 Pro Max has an optical 3x zoom lens. 14 Pro Max also has it, but on top of that, it also has a 2x crop zoom, which basically takes a part of the huge sensor and crops it to reach the 2x. The 15 Max ditches the 3x camera in favor of the 5x. If you want 3x on 15 Pro Max, it's gonna be a cropped image. And let me tell you, 5x on 15 Pro makes 14 Pro and 13 Pro bite the dust. If you crop 3x from 13 and 14 Pro Max to be like 5x, the difference won't be huge. But if I just go toast 5x, that's where 15 Pro Max takes the cake. I'd say this is the best telephoto lens I've ever tested. Definitely a step up that's worth every penny. It gives a really nice background blur and separation even without the portrait mode. But I personally like 3x portraits a bit more due to more accurate facial proportions. This 5x lens is also stabilized, so the photos are always crisp and videos as stable as can be. But the best part about the 5x on 15 Max for me is the videos, but I will come back to that shortly. Because videos in general are where the majority of changes changes are. All phones shoot 4K 60 FPS on all cameras, but that's basically where the similarities end. Because when we look at the video modes, the 14 and 15 take a huge leap. Take cinematic mode, for example. The iPhone 13 was the first one to get it, but here it is limited to 1080p 30 FPS. The edge detection is okay, but not perfect. 14 and 15 Pro Max can shoot cinematic videos in 4K 30 FPS with slightly better edge detection. And on 14 and 15 Max, you finally can lock the white balance in settings, which is a huge deal. 13 Pro Max also lacks action mode, and 14 and 15 Max, it works exactly the same way, making shaky videos extremely smooth. For many people, this is a very big and important feature of the camera. If you are a fan of dynamic and extreme sports, 14 and 15 Pro Max will be much better in capturing your adventures. But for me, a person with a ton of experience with shooting videos, there is a difference I simply cannot ignore, because the 15 Pro Max shoots in log ProRes 422, and believe me, this is huge. And what's even more impressive, the 15 Pro can record these videos straight to the external drive. Just connect the drive, wait for the Type-C text to pop up, and start shooting. It basically makes it perfect for videos, since now I can just record log and color grade later as I please. The 13 and 14 Pro don't have this feature and only shoot plain 4K 60 HDR, and let me tell you, one look at those log videos is enough to sell me this phone 10 times over. Because with log, I can take this video and turn it into this. That's what a proper color grading can do. Log and ability to record onto an external drive is enough to cross out 2 things off my list of what the Pro iPhone should do. But it gets even better than that, because if you install the Blackmagic camera app, you open a whole new world of possibilities, like recording in different codecs. ProRes 4444, for example. But what I'm most excited about is that with this app, I can shoot in H.265 log without a noticeable drop in quality, but the file size, the 265 videos weigh 8 to 9 times less than even ProRes LT. And I don't need the external drive to record all that, which can be super handy. And of course, with 15 Pro Max, all cameras shoot log, and that's exactly where the 5x comes into play. 3x on 13 Pro and 14 Pro are okay, but 5x with log, that's a totally different level. Much more flattering and natural image, less over-sharpening and over-processing. However, it seems like the 15 Pro Max still does a bit of processing, even to log, just to give us a bit better dynamic range, but I consider it to be a nice bonus. But the cameras are not enough to call the phone Pro. As I said, the Pro phone must be durable and premium. And 15 Pro Max is exactly that. The 13 and 14 Pro in terms of visuals look very similar. They both have stainless steel frames with sharp edges. This gives a premium look, but too impractical for my taste. The 15 Pro Max has a titanium frame with rounded edges, which makes it far more comfortable to hold. It is a much more tactile phone to use, and it is also much lighter. The 13 Pro Max is a fraction of an ounce lighter than 14 Max, but 15 Max is so much lighter than the 13 Max. It is a huge difference, and it is noticeable in every situation. Also, I think the titanium just looks much better. It is much more professional and utilitarian. It just asks to be used vigorously. So if I was to grade the pro-ness of the design and materials, I'd say that 15 Pro Max gets 10 points and 14 and 13 Max 7 points. Stainless steel is prone to scratches, despite those sharp edges being better for absorbing drops. The back glass on 15 Pro Max is easier to shatter, but I would happily take comfort and resistance to scratches over drop resistance any day. Now I think it's time to take a quick break and talk about this video's sponsor, Bandwork. While many Apple Watch users stick with the basic strap that comes with a device, there are times when you want to step up your style game and be a true trendsetter. This is where Bandwork comes in, offering a delightful selection of straps that are absolutely perfect for your Apple Watch. They have a wide variety to choose from, including stylish leather and sleek stainless steel options. When it comes to Bandwork bands, you can expect nothing but the best. Each leather band, like this one, carbon black from the Berlin collection or Honolulu sequel beige, is carefully crafted using the finest full-grain leather and adorned with exquisite metal elements. Metal bands such as this G1A display are precisely machined and feel like a jewel of sorts. But it's not just about looks. Bandwork bands are designed with your comfort in mind. The leather effortlessly molds to the shape of your wrist, ensuring a snug and personalized fit. The metal elements add a touch of class and sophistication that elevates your style. Plus, with multiple wrist size options available, you can easily find the perfect band for your Apple Watch, regardless of its series and size. If you want to give your Apple Watch a fresh and stylish look, then you should definitely check out the Bandwork bands. Just click the link in the description to see the full list of bands and use the code Arthur23 for a free 1-ounce leather cream. And now let's get back to the video. If you really want a Pro phone, you need some Pro features that no one has. And the action button on the 15 Pro Max is exactly that. This is a completely new feature that has never been present in iPhones, and the 13 and 14 Pro Max have the good old mute switch. The 15 Max with this action button can do much more. I can easily program this button to be a mute switch, or start a voice memo, or launch a camera, or perform a shortcut. It can basically do anything I want. And after using it for some time, I can say that this is a very useful feature. You don't understand that you need it until you actually use it. Yes, the button is situated in the place where the mute switch used to be, and reaching it with one hand is not exactly convenient, but having a button that can do many things is much better than a switch that does only one thing. So yeah, action button rules, real Pro stuff. Also, Pro iPhone needs to transfer files fast and accept different accessories. The 15 Pro Max is the only one of these three that can do all that thanks to its Type-C port. The 14 and 13 Max have all Lightning, which is much slower in terms of data transfer. It can only transfer data at speeds of only 480 megabits per second, while the Type-C and 15 Pro Max can go up to 10 gigabits per second, which is almost 20 times faster. Also, the 15 Pro Max can charge other devices you plug into it. 15 Pro will happily allow you to connect Ethernet to it via the adapter for faster internet, or I can just plug in a dongle and connect charging, external display, and SD card all at the same time. I can connect a Type-C thumb drive if needed. There are so many things that 15 Pro Max allows me to connect. 13 Pro and 14 Pro can do none of that. This is another reason to call 15 Pro Max a real Pro iPhone. Now I just can't ignore the displays, because without a proper display, the phone just becomes an expensive camera. And here there are many similarities and many differences between the three phones. First off, all of them have Pro Motion, which makes the animation super smooth and clear. I cannot say that on one phone the animations are faster than on the other. They are just as fast on the 13 Pro as they are on the 15 Pro, but 14 and 15 Pro have an ace up their sleeves against the 13 Pro, the Dynamic Island. I've already said a lot about Dynamic Island in my long-term reviews of the 14 Pro, so be sure to watch that to get a full picture. But long story, the Dynamic Island is a cool and interesting feature that is more like a gimmick, and the fact that the 13 Max doesn't have that makes it look extremely dated from the front. The notch just looks old and obsolete. By the way, the Dynamic Island on the 15 Pro is exactly the same as on the 14 Pro, no differences here. Another difference you see when you put the phones side by side is how much slimmer the bezels are on the 15 Pro rather than on 14 Pro and 13 Pro Max. 13 Pro Max has by far the thickest bezels, and 14 Pro Max has ever so slightly thinner bezels, but here the difference is almost invisible. There is one more thing about the displays that you need to know about. The 14 Pro and 15 Pro displays that go up to 2000 nits of peak brightness compared to only 1000 nits on the 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 15 and 14 Pro are much easier to use under direct sunlight. The 14 and 15 Pro have always on, but that is not something you should really pay attention to in my opinion. Always on isn't a Pro feature for me, and I have it turned off, so let's just put it aside. Because the Pro iPhone should be powerful enough to let all the features and cameras work to their full force. And this might be the simplest thing to compare, to be honest. The 13 Pro Max is equipped with the A15 Bionic that has 6 CPU cores and 5 GPU cores. The A16 and the 14 Pro Max has the same number of CPU and GPU cores, but is slightly more powerful and slightly more energy efficient. I would say that 13 and 14 Pro Max are very close in terms of performance, both in regular applications and demanding games, but 15 Pro Max just wipes the floor with all of them. The A17 Pro inside has an extra GPU core and is manufactured at 3nm technology, which makes it even more energy and power efficient. This processor is so powerful that it can run run effortlessly heavy AAA games, such as Resident Evil. Look, here I am, playing Death Stranding on my iPhone 15 Pro with a PlayStation controller. And it runs flawlessly at 30 FPS, but aside from that display of 15 Pro Max's might, when I actually use the phones in real life, I can barely see any difference. All system apps work super fast, and even third-party apps load almost exactly as fast on the 13 Pro as on the 15 Pro. There's only one really noticeable difference: 8GB of RAM on 15 Pro allows more apps to stay open in the background than 6GB on 14 Pro and 13 Pro. That's basically it. So if you are a heavy multitasker, 15 Pro Max is maybe the one to go for. I know that comparing these phones is a bit silly. The 14 Pro Max is better than 13 Pro Max and 15 Pro Max is better than 14 Pro Max. This is a very obvious conclusion, but what is really interesting is that if we really look at what makes the phone Pro, then we'll see that 14 Pro Max is much closer to 13 Pro Max. Those are two amazing phones, each with its unique features, but none of that is enough to justify the name. The iPhone 15 Pro Max is the first real Pro iPhone, at least for me. Thank you for watching, guys, and see you in the next one.